Greetings, students. Happy chapter number 12. So let's continue our conversation about the elementary age school years and talk about what is going on cognitively with our kids. So remember, every time that we talk about cognitive learning or your brain, we're only referring to the theorist named Piaget. And so Piaget says when kids start to get into school, those ages of 6 to 11, and they're going through that learning process, they develop what he calls concrete operational thought, right? So that means that now, instead of bringing that pre-operational thought, now kids are starting to understand some concrete ideals. And this is because, again, they're learning to read, they're learning math facts, they're going through all of these different things, right? And so they can start to think logically. Right? They start to understand how things work. And so concrete, they're now more responsible to learning some real hard facts. All right, and this is a time, think of third grade typically. Third grade is when we do our math facts. So this is when your child is coming home with those cards and it's like, okay, 3 times 2, 3 times 3, 3 times 4, 3 times 5, and they're memorizing their math facts. And this is why they can process and understand things much more than your preschoolers do, right? So this is how they can swindle their younger brothers or sisters, right? When they say to them, listen, I'll give you this shiny quarter. Look how pretty. If you give me that green paper that has a 5 on it that mom gave you, and your preschooler is like, okay, right? Because they don't understand the value of money, but your third grader does, right? They understand that. And so this is why I say, this is a crucial time, and it is the prime opportunity to teach your children about money, right? How many of you did your parents teach you about financial management or about money, right? How many of you did that happen? We as parents kind of sometimes neglect that process. And we think, oh, what's there to learn? Well, there's a whole lot to learn. There's a reason that we have so many young people and Americans, 30% of American families file for bankruptcy, right? So we have a problem with this overspending with credit cards, which allow us to have things we want now when we can't pay for them now or later. Right? And so teach your kids about money. So students will often ask me things like, well, what do you think about allowance? Should I give my kids allowance? And I think if we want to have an emotionally healthy child, I think number one, I would say you don't tie allowance to chores, because I've taught my kids, and I think it's healthy to teach them that my children have to do chores around the house because we're a family. And in order for us to function as far as like having dinner and as far as dishes getting done and having a safe and secure home and the laundry being washed and the yard being mowed and all those things, I need everyone to help out, right? And so we all work together, and I'm not going to reward them for doing something that helps our family to work together. And so I don't think you should tie that, because what's going to happen is as your kids get older, like if it's your son's job to take out the trash, right? As your kid gets to be 13 or 14, he might say, I don't feel like taking out the trash this week. You just go ahead and keep my allowance this week. Well, we still need the trash to go outside, right? So that's why I don't think that we tie allowance to actual responsibilities at home. I give my kids allowance so that they can learn to be good money managers. I want them to use the money, right? So here's what I do. I typically give them allowance based on their age. So if they're 5, they get $5 a week. Right? As they get older, it gets harder, right? Because once they get into the teens, they're making quite a bit of money. However, what we do is, let's say we're all driving around and I say, I really feel like an ice cream. Let's go to Baskin-Robbins or Cold Stone and get an ice cream, right? When we go to Baskin-Robbins or Cold Stone to get an ice cream, my kids have the option of using their allowance to get an ice cream, or they don't need to get an ice cream. Mom's not going to get it, right? Because when I'm teaching them, you get a certain amount of money, and you can do one of two things. You could be a saver. You could save it, like if you want to purchase a game or purchase something, or you can spend it every week on things you want. It's up to you. However, when it's gone, right? And yeah, I have walked out of Jamba Juice or ice cream place without one of my kids getting an ice cream because they'd either spent all their money or they didn't want to spend it on the ice cream. They wanted something else, and that's fine. But my goal is I want them to learn how to use money, right? So I give them allowance, right? And start young and early. I really do think even your 6-year-old can understand about money. She can learn. So you're giving her allowance and she says, Mom, can we go to Walmart this weekend? Because I have enough money. I want to buy a Barbie. And so you take your daughter to Walmart to go buy a Barbie, and she goes down the Barbie aisle. She spends forever in the Barbie aisle, right? Goes up and down, and she finally comes out and says, Mom, I found the Barbie I want. Now, your daughter has $15, right? So she shows you this Mattel sparkle. She has wings. She turns around. She sings, whatever. She's beautiful, right? She's this beautiful Barbie, right? So she shows the Barbie, and you look at the Barbie and say, oh, honey, she's beautiful, but it says she's $17.99. Right? We don't have $17.99. Now, is she just $17.99 when you go to the register to pay for her? No, my kids understand tax. So they know how to add tax onto purchases, right? So you say, well, honey, we have 2 options here, right? We can, either look for a Barbie that is less than $15, or we can come back another time for her. Now your daughter is going to say to you, well, Mom, can't you just give me the money in advance, right? Can't you just loan me the money like next week's allowance? Give me it now. And you're going to say, as a good parent, you need to say, honey, I asked for an advance at my job and they wouldn't give it to me, because that's not how the world works, right? We don't get advances on our paychecks. And so you have to teach your children money is finite, meaning you only have so much and you need to be able to use what's there. And so I say to my daughter, honey, we can look for another Barbie, or we can put her back and we can come back next week, right? And so we go look for another Barbie. And I come out and I say, look, I found something that you can afford, right? She's $12.99, so even with our tax, you can afford her, right? And I show her Equate Barbie. She doesn't have any sparkles, no wings, she doesn't dance or sing. She's really not that attractive, but you know what? She's a Barbie. And I say, well, honey, we can either right now walk out of the store with Equate Barbie, the generic, or we can come back next week. You have to wait a week after you've gotten your allowance next weekend, and we can afford to come back and get Mattel Sparkle Barbie. This is your choice. Now, hopefully you're not shopping with your partner, your husband, your wife, whoever it would be, right? Because what has your child learned, right? If you're shopping with your partner and they're at another place in the store, your child's going to run over to your partner and go, Mommy won't give me the $3 I need to get my Barbie, and will you give me the $3, right? And then you need to give your partner that look that says, don't you dare. I'm teaching. This is a teaching moment here, so don't even think about giving her that money. She's got to learn, right? So you need to be on the same page. But I think that this is something that parents miss the boat on. They miss the opportunity to start young and teaching your child to be a good financial manager. This is going to help them in life as they continue on, right? So many young people are in credit card debt and have issues with finances because they didn't understand how to manage money. And it's our job as parents to teach it. All right, so let's talk about Vygotsky. Remember, Vygotsky is a sociocultural theorist. He says it's all about your environment and family and friends. And what he says is that our kids, as they go into this age group, they definitely learn to talk to you, family, different than they talk to their friends. There's like a different language, right? So if your son comes home and he says to you, hey, dude, right? If you did that to me, I'm going to say, oh, son, your mom is not a dude. Right? You don't call me dude. You call me mom. Right? Your friends are dudes because your son is going to talk to your friends different than they talk to you, right? And then understand that even though we send our kids to school for them to learn, if you will, you as a parent, it is your job to be teaching your child at every opportunity, right? So every experience after birth teaches your children something. This is why I think of the car drive time as a really good time for learning. In other words, a lot of people, and especially today when we have our AirPods and we have everything else that our kids can all be listening to devices, and you're driving and you're listening to the news, right? And there's no conversation going on in the car. Everyone's in their own world. However, I'm going to say it's a really good time for conversation, and it's a really good time to learn things. I love questions. I love my kids asking me questions, or I love talking to them as I would talk to an adult, and them saying, so what does that word mean? I don't know that word you just said. I'm going to teach you what that word means, right? That's going to help their vocabulary, right? So teach your kids all the time. All right. We mentioned this last time, or on our last exam, that really we think of the child's brain as similar to a computer in the sense of that it's processing information. And so the information processing theory is our way of comparing or equating a brain to the computer analysis that would go on. All right, and our kids learn everywhere, right? So that's what I'm saying, not just in school, but you could be teaching your kids about the type of work that you do in every environment. Yes, they learn at school. However, if we look at this child here on the bottom slide here, you know, we can see this child may be hustling tourists in Ecuador, right? And this child probably has phenomenal math skills, right? This child probably knows, oh, if she wants to buy 4 of these, I can tell her how much that is right now, right? I know my math because I've learned how much to ask for these and how much change to give, right? And he's probably learned some psychology too, which means that he can probably look at the tourist and say, oh, that man over there, forget it. I'm not going to approach him. He's not going to give me anything. That lady over there, she's a sucker, man. She's going to buy like 5 of them, right? He's kind of learned to read people. And these are some good skills that we can learn or teach our kids, not in the classroom. Right. Our memory. So our memory kind of goes through these 3 different stages. The first one being the sensory memory, which is just kind of instantaneous, split-second type of processing that goes on. And then we go to our short-term or working memory, right? And so this, again, lasts for a limited time. And our goal, like your goal in this class, is to get information into your long-term memory. Because when we get information into our long-term memory, it kind of means that later on when we need it, I can get it out. Right? So the long-term memory is where we store information and then we retrieve it, such as when you're taking your exam, you want to store the information and retrieve it when you need it. All right. Again, we kind of touched on that our middle school age, our kids here are adjusting their vocabulary to context. The word context means the situation, right? And so they switch from one manner of speaking or language code to another. Just think of texting. Right? Texting LOL, all these different things. I mean, I don't know what half of them mean, but my kids sure do. Right? They have, texting is like a whole nother world and a whole nother language. And they have a way of communicating and speaking with their friends that doesn't apply to kind of how they talk to their family at home. All right, let's talk about learning English. So we used to call it ESL, English Second Language. We now refer to English language learners as ELL, English language learners, meaning that these children spoke a different language at birth, or their native language is different, and they are learning English. And it refers to the proficiency of English in these children. Typically in our schools, what we do is pull kids out. So we'll pull them out for a short time to continue to focus on that English language learning. Yet at this age, they're really able to pick it up rather quickly. All right, learning a second language. Well, we talked about last time that the ideal time to learn a second language is early childhood, under the age of 6, right? That's ideal, right? What we want to know, or what we see here, is that there's different ways we can learn a second language, and we're really not sure of the best approach yet, right? So a couple of approaches. The immersion program would be if you wanted to learn German, and we went ahead and we flew you to Germany and we had you live with a German family. And what that means is everything is in German. This family speaks German. All the road signs are in German. Everything's in German. You're going to learn the language because, gee, everything's in German. You're immersed. Or think of if you were to dunk yourself in the bathtub or in the pool, you're completely covered. So we think of it as the language is everywhere. Right? Second language taught as a foreign tongue is really pretty much what we do in school. So in school, we're teaching Spanish, for instance, in high school for 2 years, right? And so we're teaching you Spanish, a foreign tongue, you know, as a second language. And in all honesty, unfortunately, most of our high schoolers don't actually come out like speaking fluent Spanish in any way. Bilingual schooling is different. Bilingual schooling means that when you go to the school, the instructor or teacher will say the phrase in English and repeat it in Spanish. So they're giving equal time to both languages. That's bilingual. And again, research says we're not quite sure of the best way, although we know the best time. All right, so unfortunately, English language learning and just actually learning in general is really affected by poverty. So there's a big correlation between your income level and your language exposure. I mentioned to you before that our preschoolers from low-income families are entering preschool, learning or knowing 3,000 to 5,000 words less than middle income children. And that's a big, big deficit or gap in their learning. However, what we know, and this is a positive thing, is that teachers and parents' expectations of what these kids can learn has a whole lot to do with their learning ability. So for instance, my children attend a charter school, Aspire Charter Schools. And the way that Aspire Charter Schools works is they build new schools in low-income neighborhoods. So that's the goal. The goal is to go into a low-income neighborhood and build a brand new school. And the children that live in that neighborhood are the first children to enroll in that school. And then they open it up kind of like to outside families, right? My oldest daughter was on the wait list for 3 years before we got in to the charter school. I love the charter school because first of all, it's tuition free, yet I feel like my kids go to a private school. They wear uniforms. It is a college prep school, so they're very focused on academics. And the reason that Aspire and all charter schools kind of work that follow this format is because we know that if low-income children come to the school and kindergarten, and our teachers have high expectations. In other words, they tell them you will go to college. It's just a matter of which college. And you will learn this material in kindergarten. You will learn your ABCs and your numbers and reading and all that. The children do it. So research has proven over and over again that low-income children are not stupid. Not at all. They need to have the right teaching, and they have proven over and over again that they can rise to that challenge and learn the material, even phenomenally sometimes, right? And so when we as parents also have those expectations, my children know I expect them to go to college. It's not really a question. Now, I've said to my kids, if you have a gifting creatively, and let's say you want to go and be an artist or do ballet, that's okay, because I don't want to force you to do something you don't enjoy. However, I want you to probably go to art school, or I want you to go to Juilliard, or I want you to go and learn what it is so that you have a better chance of succeeding and you could be successful. Now, of course, I'm hoping they pick a career that will give them a good financial income, but I want my kids to choose something they want to do, right? But so when you're a parent, even if you're a low-income parent, right, you need to praise your kids and you need to hold them to a high level in school. So when your child comes home and they get this little report card from their teacher that has check marks saying, oh, meeting standard or exceeding standard, all of that, you need to make a big deal about it. You need to let them pick where we're going for dinner. You need to, sometimes give them a reward if you can, right? You're going to get a bike. You're going to get to go to the movies. You're going to get to go with your friends to, go to Sky Zone or do something fun. But if you praise them verbally and if you reward them, they want to keep doing it. And that's what we want, right? So kids can learn. All right, curriculum specifics vary by place and culture. So let me explain what that means. That means that curriculum means the material we use in class. So for instance, in our human development class here, we have a textbook. We also have PowerPoint slides. We also have, the material I've given you, like a study guide. These videos that I'm making, this is your curriculum. It's the learning material. And we see or find that it varies greatly depending on the culture and the place or location, right? So curriculum has to do with, in other words, for Aspire schools, they have different courses than maybe a public school would have. Right? They don't have as many sports as another school might have because they focus on academics. So there's different curriculum. So whether we're here in America on the left-hand side and our children are reading the Magic Schoolhouse book books or whatever they're reading, or we're here in another country where this little boy is reading the Quran, right? Because this culture feels it's important to teach them something from a holy book. And so both kids are reading different things, but they're both reading, which is what's crucial at this age. All right, again, if we look at this slide, you're going to see that America's not doing so hot when it comes to education. This is really concerning, very concerning. And so we see here that we're actually down there at number 11. And there are so many countries where their children are performing much better than our kids are. And this is confusing because we literally pour billions of dollars into education, yet we are missing the boat in so many ways. That's a whole nother conversation. All right, sex differences in school. What we see is that girls tend to excel ahead of boys in terms of verbal skills, English and things like that. Boys tend to excel above girls when it comes to math and science. And that is why there's such a push today to get girls involved in STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, because we're finding that especially when it comes to our different coding and computer programming, that, I mean, sometimes 95% of those jobs are held by males. And we need to get more females into those positions. And so we're working to expose our girls to more science. And in general, girls tend to have higher or better grades than boys do up until we hit puberty. Anyone have a thought on why girls are now distracted at puberty? Yep, it's because boys come along. All right, No Child Left Behind, or NCLB. NCLB basically was this requirement that the government had that said, you know what, we need to make sure that our kids are learning. And so they started to hold all of the states and schools' requirement accountable. So what they said is, your kids have to take a test. And if your kids don't pass this test, we're not going to pay you for that kid. And so it really, the schools were hustling to get their kids educated, didn't work. We left a whole lot of kids behind, So it really, really didn't work. Unfortunately, we've moved on to the Common Core standards, and that's not all favorable either. Common Core standards is really challenging for kids because Common Core says, we all learn differently. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a math problem and we're going to show you 3 different ways to learn it, which might be okay because some kids might like A method, some kids might like B method, and some kids might like C. However, on the test, kids have to show A, B, and C. And I can only think of, it's hard enough for them to learn 1 way to do a problem, let alone 3 ways to do a problem. So there's some challenges with our Common Core too. When it comes to school, hey guys, I'm gonna take a really quick break, just plug my charger into my Mac so it doesn't die on us. Hold on. All right, sorry about that. Usually I make sure that I'm all plugged up and everything, but I've been doing a few videos. So anyway, okay, so let's talk about, remember, the way that our education system works is federal government has lots of money for education, right? They give that money to the states. The states then distribute the money to different schools, right? And so we see here there's different types of schools. The one most of us are familiar with is public schools, right? So public schools, basically, they are able to set their own, they have to, because the government's giving them all the money, public schools do what the government says. So the government says, we're going to use Common Core learning, and these are the textbooks we're going to use, and we're going to teach sex education at this age, and this is what we're going to do, and that's what the public schools do. And most of us understand wherever you live, that there will be a public school assigned to your neighborhood, and that's where your children would go. The next type of school is a charter school. Charter school is a little different, right? The charter school is a public school, so it is a public school, but because they don't get all of their money from the government, what the charter school does is they get some of their money from the government, but they also accept or take money from private funders, like the Bill Gates Foundation, which has given millions of dollars to many charter schools. And so what they do is they get money from outside, because what these foundations or the people that give money have learned is that charter schools are doing a pretty good job. And so they're really supporting them. The thing that's different between a public school and a charter school is that a charter school can pick its own curriculum. So they don't have to use the books that the government says to use. If they don't want to teach sex education, they don't have to. So they have a little bit more leeway in what they can teach. So, you know, like for instance, my kids have more school days in a year, 19 more school days than public schools, and their school day is an hour longer than a public school. And that's so that they can get academic learning in, and so they can make up the rules a little more. So again, charter school gets funding from government and public or private sources also. Then the next type of school is a private school. So the private school gets no money from the government. None. Where do they get their money? A private school gets their money from parents who pay tuition. So if you want your child to go to a private school, you pay tuition to support that. When we think of private schools, we primarily think of our religious schools, our Catholic schools or other schools that are private. And the reason that, you know, they maybe want to be private is because they don't have to do some of the things the government wants them to do. So for instance, in our religious schools, they're teaching different classes on religion. They may not have sex education, or they may have it in a different format or a different way. And so they can kind of do what they want because they're not getting government money. They're funded by the families. Vouchers, we really don't use vouchers too much anymore. Vouchers was a good idea. It was basically saying, you know what, it's kind of not fair that all of the low-income families don't have good schools, that they're in neighborhoods with low-performing schools. So you know what we'll do? We'll give them a paper. And with the paper, they can go and register at a private school, and the government will pay for that school. It just didn't really work because the families were struggling to get their kids across town. Right? So if you live in a certain place, it was hard to go all the way across town and get your child to the private school that you wanted them to go to. And homeschooling. So homeschooling is what it says. It's schooling or teaching your child at home. It is legal, definitely. Actually, I'll tell you, homeschooling done well is pretty phenomenal. I considered it when my kids were younger. So what homeschooling does is the parent actually withdraws their child from the school district. Now, the government will give the parent money to buy the curriculum. Because in other words, instead of the government paying the school to teach your child, they give you money and say, you're going to teach your child. But however, with that money, I have to go buy all the books and everything that my child needs, right? I then teach my child at home, and at the end of the school year, my child has to go down to the district office and take the same test. For instance, if they're in third grade, they take the test for third graders because the government wants to make sure that your child is learning at home. You can't just keep your child home and not teach them. So that's homeschooling. Now, the positive thing about homeschooling is, let's say I am a stay-at-home mom and I'm homeschooling my kids. If I have one child or two kids, our school is probably 3 hours, maybe 3.5, possibly 4, but not really, because when I have one person, I'm the adult teacher, and I only have one child or two, I can get so much more done than when I was teaching third grade and I had 32 kids in my room. So I spend a minimal amount of time with my teaching, and the students kind of do a lot of work on the computer and on their own, and you're able to do very well. And so a lot of our homeschooling kids actually finish high school at like 16 or 17 instead of 18. They finish early because they've been able to do so much with that one-on-one attention that they get. I think one of the reasons I didn't do homeschooling was because my concern was always, well, how do I get my child to dissect a frog? Or how do you do the labs or the things that you want them to do that are more hands-on? And I wanted to make sure my kids had some good social skills. However, homeschoolers have associations, and the associations get together and they do those things together. So homeschooling done well can be a good thing. These are the different types of schools that we have here in the US. All right, guys, I think we're done. So I will let you go ahead, and we'll talk next time about the elementary school years and to talk about what's going on emotionally and psychologically with our kids. See you for chapter 13.